When exceptional leadership emerges from unconventional paths, history judges not how power was obtained, but how masterfully it's wielded. President Ibrahim Traoré's tactical brilliance, unwavering resolve, and profound commitment to his nation's sovereignty would be tested like never before, revealing why some men are destined to lead regardless of how they ascend to power. For Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, this moral riddle wasn't an abstract philosophical debate, but the razor's edge upon which his legitimacy balanced. The nation whispered about him in contradictions: liberator and dictator, patriot and opportunist. On this sweltering Tuesday morning in May, those contradictions would crystallize into something far more dangerous. The Central Bank of Burkina Faso stood as a monument to financial aspiration in downtown Ouagadougou, its glass facade reflecting the harsh West African sun like a mirage of prosperity in a desert of economic uncertainty. The bank's 6 floors housed the financial hopes of a nation struggling to define itself in the shadow of former colonial powers. Precisely 9:17 a.m. A man in an unassuming gray suit and simple black tie entered through the employee entrance, accompanied by a single companion whose vigilant eyes scanned for threats despite his casual dress. No ceremonial welcome greeted the pair. No red carpet unfurled beneath their feet. That was exactly how Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old military officer who had seized control of Burkina Faso 8 months earlier, preferred it. "You're certain this won't appear in tomorrow's papers?" Traoré asked his bodyguard, Moussa Sankara, a man who had stood beside him since their days as junior officers. "As certain as one can be in a city where walls have ears," Moussa replied, his hand resting near the concealed pistol beneath his jacket. "The meeting is listed under International Investment Consultation. Only 3 people know your true identity: the bank governor, his assistant, and the security chief." Traoré nodded, adjusting his tie. 3 people is still too many. They took the private elevator to the 5th floor, where Adama Konate, the bank's governor, a brilliant economist who had returned from a prestigious position at the African Development Bank to serve his struggling homeland, waited alone in his office. "Mr. President." Konate greeted him with a formal handshake, the honorific feeling strange in this clandestine setting. "Thank you for agreeing to this unorthodox arrangement. Formalities waste time we don't have," Traoré replied, taking a seat across from Konate's mahogany desk. "Show me what you couldn't tell me over secure channels." Konate nodded, producing a leather portfolio. "Our currency reserves are critically low, worse than the official reports indicate. Without intervention, we face economic collapse within 4 months." The bank governor laid out spreadsheets detailing the nation's precarious financial position. Foreign exchange reserves had plummeted after Western donors suspended aid following Traoré's military takeover. Meanwhile, inflation was devouring the savings of ordinary citizens. "Your predecessor siphoned more than we realized," Konate explained. "The previous administration's corruption was even more extensive than our audits initially revealed." Traoré studied the figures, his expression hardening. "And your solution?" "A controversial one," Konate admitted, lowering his voice despite the soundproofed room. "We quietly approached the Chinese for direct currency support, bypassing the IMF conditions that would force us to open our rare earth mineral rights to Western corporations." Outside the bank governor's office window, Ouagadougou stretched toward the horizon, a sprawling city of contrasts where luxury SUVs navigated around donkey carts, where air-conditioned shopping centers stood adjacent to open-air markets. It was a city, like the nation itself, suspended between tradition and modernity, between sovereignty and dependency. "The Americans and French will consider this a betrayal," Traoré noted, though his tone suggested this consequence held little weight in his calculations. "They betrayed us first," Konate replied with quiet conviction. For decades, before Traoré could respond, the building's emergency alarm system erupted into a shrill wail. Moussa was instantly at the window, peering down at the commotion below. "Armed men entering the main lobby," he reported, his professional calm belied by the tension in his shoulders. "At least 6 that I can see. Military-grade weapons." Within seconds, the bank's PA system crackled to life. A voice, eerily calm despite its ominous message, addressed the building's occupants. This is a message to all employees and visitors of the Central Bank of Burkina Faso. We have taken control of the premises. Remain where you are with your hands visible. Any attempt to contact outside authorities will result in immediate executions. This is not a robbery. This is a revolution. Konate's face drained of color. My God. Today of all days. Traoré moved with practiced efficiency, his military training emerging like a second skin. Barricade the door. Musa, what's our exit strategy? The emergency stairwell leads to the roof, Musa replied, already pushing a heavy filing cabinet against the office door. Helicopter evacuation is protocol for the bank governor in security situations. And if they've disabled the helicopter, Traoré challenged. Then we negotiate, Musa said simply. Konate was already on the secure phone, but his expression crumpled as he replaced the receiver. Lines are cut. They must have had inside help. From beyond the barricaded door came the sound of gunfire, short, controlled bursts followed by screams. Not indiscriminate shooting, Traoré noted, but precise, tactical fire designed to establish dominance and terror. These aren't common criminals, he observed. That's military training. A television mounted on the wall of Konate's office flickered to life automatically as the bank's emergency system activated. Security camera feeds from throughout the building cycled across the screen, revealing the unfolding crisis. In the main banking hall, dozens of customers and employees lay face down on the marble floor, while masked figures in black tactical gear positioned themselves strategically throughout the space. Professionals, Musa confirmed grimly, and they're sweeping the building systematically. On the security feed, one figure stood out, unmasked, standing calmly amidst the chaos. A tall man with a distinctive facial scar running from his left eye to his jaw, dressed not in tactical gear but in an impeccable charcoal suit nearly identical to Traoré's own. François Diarra, Konate whispered in disbelief. You know him? Traoré asked sharply. The bank governor nodded slowly. Former special forces, discharged under suspicion of selling military intelligence. He disappeared 2 years ago. Rumors connected him to mercenary activities in Libya and Mali. And now he's here, Traoré observed, watching as Diarra methodically organized the hostage situation below. On the exact day I choose for a secret meeting, his eyes narrowed. That's not coincidence. Outside, police sirens wailed as first responders established a perimeter around the bank. On the television screen, they watched as Diarra picked up a phone, presumably connecting to police negotiators, and began what appeared to be calm, measured demands. We need to know what he wants, Traoré said, focusing on the screen as if in answer. The office phone rang, startling all three men. After a tense moment, Konate reached for it with a trembling hand and activated the speakerphone. Governor Konate, came a smooth, cultured voice that matched the unmasked man on the screen. I trust President Traoré is with you as scheduled? The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Konate's eyes darted to Traoré, who gave a slight nod. I am here, Traoré answered, his voice betraying none of the tension evident in his rigid posture. Excellent, Diarra replied, satisfaction evident in his tone. That simplifies matters considerably. I have 73 hostages under my control. I also have 8 men with military training and nothing to lose. What I don't have, yet, is access to the bank's primary vault and reserve currency stockpile. You've gone to extraordinary lengths for a robbery, Traoré observed. A chuckle came through the speaker. If I wanted money, Mr. President, there are far easier targets. No, what I want is something only you can provide. And that is justice, Diarra replied simply. At precisely 9 o'clock this evening, you will go on national television and confess to orchestrating the Touraga massacre. You will admit that the attack blamed on jihadists was actually carried out by your forces to justify your coup. You will name your co-conspirators, including General Matthew Zongo and Colonel Philippe Ouedraogo. Traoré's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of Konate's desk. The Touraga massacre was the work of terrorists. I had no involvement, That's not what the evidence shows, Diarra countered smoothly. Evidence I've spent 2 years collecting. The same evidence I'll release to international media if you refuse my terms. What evidence? Traoré demanded. Satellite imagery, communications intercepts, testimony from 3 officers who participated under your direct orders. All secured in digital deadman switches that activate if I don't enter specific codes every hour. The Touraga massacre had been the final catalyst for Traoré's coup, a horrific attack on a remote village that had killed 175 civilians, mostly women and children. The previous government's apparent inability to protect its citizens had fueled public support for Traoré's takeover. You have until noon to consider my proposal, Diarra continued. After that, I start executing hostages hourly until you comply. The line went dead. Konate looked at Traoré, his expression a complex mixture of shock and uncertainty. Mr. President, these allegations are fabrications. Traoré cut him off firmly. I was stationed 300 kilometers from Touraga when the massacre occurred. This is political manipulation, nothing more. Whether Konate believed him remained unclear as the bank governor turned to the window, watching police and military units establish a perimeter around the building. They'll be preparing a tactical assault, Musa observed. Standard protocol would give negotiators 3 hours before special forces consider infiltration options, which would be suicide for the hostages, Traoré countered. Diarra's men are too well positioned. Any frontal assault would result in a bloodbath. Traoré approached the television, studying the tactical positions of the hostage takers. Something about their deployment pattern nagged at his military instincts. They were too spread out, covering too many angles for just 8 men. This isn't right, he muttered. Their formation is defensive, but with gaps no trained tactician would leave. Musa joined him at the screen. Unless they're expecting reinforcements, Traoré finished grimly. This isn't just about me or his supposed evidence. It's the opening move in something larger. The office phone rang again. This time, Traoré answered directly. I've considered your proposal, he said without preamble. I need to speak with you directly.
No intermediaries.
Pause. That would be unwise on my part, Mr. President. You claim to have evidence I orchestrated a massacre. Traoré replied evenly. If that's true, you have nothing to fear from me. If you're lying, however... Another pause, longer this time. 5th floor conference room. You come alone, unarmed. Agreed. Musa immediately protested. Sir, this is exactly what he wants. You're walking into a trap. Of course I am, Traoré replied calmly. But so is he. Before departing, Traoré opened his suit jacket, revealing a slim bulletproof vest. Standard precaution for all my movements, he explained to Konate's surprised expression. Being a controversial leader has its hazards. What's your plan? Musa asked, clearly uncomfortable with his protective role being compromised. Information gathering, Traoré replied. Something doesn't add up. Diarra could have released his supposed evidence anonymously from anywhere in the world. Instead, he stages an elaborate hostage crisis to deliver an ultimatum in person. He shook his head. There's more at play. Traoré stepped out into the corridor, immediately flanked by 2 of Diarra's men who had been waiting outside. They escorted him to the conference room at the end of the hall, a modern space with glass walls that had been covered with black fabric from the inside. Blocking any view of the interior point, one of the men patted him down thoroughly, removing his phone and a pocket knife before opening the door. Traoré entered alone. François Diarra stood at the far end of the conference table, a tablet computer in his hands. He was taller in person than he had appeared on the security feed, with an athlete's build and the watchful stillness that marked experienced special forces operators. President Traoré. Diarra greeted him with a slight nod that contained neither respect nor particular animosity. I appreciate your pragmatism. I appreciate efficiency, Traoré countered, remaining standing. Let's not waste time. You don't have evidence of my involvement in Touraga because I wasn't involved. A predictable denial, Diarra replied, sliding the tablet across the table. Perhaps this will refresh your memory. Traoré picked up the device. On screen was a collection of satellite imagery showing military vehicles approaching Touraga village on the day of the massacre, along with what appeared to be signal intercepts ordering a unit to cleanse the village of sympathizers. Fabricated, Traoré stated, though he studied the material carefully. The convoy patterns don't match standard military protocols of that period. Your technical team was thorough but missed details only someone with actual command experience would recognize. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Diarra's scarred face. You're not working alone, Traoré continued, pressing his advantage. This operation is too sophisticated, too well-funded. Who's backing you? French intelligence? American contractors? Or is it closer to home, General Zongo, perhaps? He never accepted being passed over for leadership after the coup. Diarra's expression hardened. My backers aren't relevant to our discussion. They're entirely relevant, Traoré countered, because this isn't about justice for Touraga. It's about destabilizing my government. He set down the tablet. What happens after I make this supposed confession? Who takes power in the chaos that follows? Before Diarra could respond, his radio crackled with an urgent message. Sir, we have a situation in the main hall. One of the hostages requires medical attention. Diarra frowned, keying his radio. Handle it. Sir, it's the elderly woman, the diabetic. She's going into shock. Traoré watched Diarra carefully, noting the conflict in the man's expression, the calculated ruthlessness of a mercenary at war with something else, something that hadn't been completely excised from his character. Your operation has a flaw, Diarra, Traoré said quietly. You've planned for resistance, for tactical responses, for negotiation scenarios, but you haven't planned for the humanity of your hostages. They're not abstractions. They're individuals with needs, health conditions, families. Spare me the humanitarian lecture, Diarra snapped. I've seen your kind of leadership before, idealism that crumbles into corruption and compromise. Then why stage this elaborate scenario? Traoré pressed. If I'm just another corrupt leader, why not simply release your evidence? Diarra's jaw tightened. Because the world needs to see you confess. The truth means nothing without accountability. Traoré took a calculated risk. The Touraga massacre haunts me every night, he said softly. Not because I ordered it, but because I failed to prevent it. I was tracking the terrorist cell for weeks before they struck. My intelligence reports warning of an imminent attack were ignored by the previous administration. Something flickered in Diarra's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or doubt. You investigate me so thoroughly, yet missed this, Traoré continued. Or did your backers intentionally withhold this information? Ask yourself, Diarra, are you serving justice? Or are you just another weapon being deployed by powers that want to maintain their influence in our country? The radio crackled again. Sir, the woman's condition is deteriorating. We need to decide now. Diarra hesitated, then keyed his radio. Allow the bank's first aid officer to treat her. To Traoré, he added coldly, don't mistake practical necessity for weakness. I mistake it for humanity, Traoré replied. Something your operation requires you to suppress, but which still exists within you. Diarra's expression hardened. You have remarkable confidence for a man in your position, because unlike you, I understand what's truly happening here, Traoré said, his voice taking on a new edge of authority. This isn't about Touraga at all. It's about what Governor Konate and I were discussing when you conveniently interrupted. He observed Diarra carefully as he continued. Our plan to secure Chinese currency support and break Western financial control over our economy. Quite a coincidence that your operation targets both the political and financial leadership simultaneously, isn't it? The slight widening of Diarra's eyes confirmed Traoré's suspicion. Who approached you first? Traoré pressed. French intelligence or American contractors? You credit me with more geopolitical significance than I possess, Diarra replied, but his denial lacked conviction. I credit your backers with recognizing a threat to their interests, Traoré countered. Our natural resources have been exploited for generations. The moment we seek economic independence, this elaborate operation materializes. He stepped closer to Daera, a calculated move that demonstrated either supreme confidence or recklessness. I don't believe you were originally told to kill hostages. That's not how Western intelligence services prefer to operate. Too messy, too much international blowback. But your mission has changed, hasn't it? Because something even more valuable than anticipated walked into this bank this morning. Daera's hand drifted subtly toward his concealed weapon. If you kill me, Traoré said calmly, you trigger the contingency plans I've established. My death would be the ultimate proof of foreign interference, rallying national support behind my policies and my designated successor, who, I assure you, is even more committed to economic sovereignty than I am. It was a bluff, but one delivered with such conviction that doubt crept into Daera's calculated facade. The tension between them was interrupted by the conference room door opening. One of Daera's men entered urgently. Sir, we have a development. Military units are repositioning around the perimeter. They're preparing for an assault. Daera's expression darkened. They wouldn't risk the hostages, unless they know something we don't. The man replied nervously. Traoré seized the moment of uncertainty. Your operation is compromised, Daera. Whoever sent you has decided you're more valuable as a martyr than as a successful operative. They're using you, just as they've used Africa for centuries. Doubt now clearly visible in Daera's eyes. Traoré pressed his advantage. Work with me, not against me. Help me resolve this without bloodshed. And I'll ensure you have the opportunity to tell your full story, including who recruited you and what they promised. You expect me to trust you? Daera asked incredulously. I expect you to recognize when you're being sacrificed. Traoré replied evenly. Daera studied him intently before speaking into his radio. All units, maintain positions. No provocative actions. To his subordinate, he ordered, verify the military movements. Full details. When they were alone again, Daera's facade of absolute control had fractured. Even if what you suggest is true, it's too late to simply walk away. It's never too late to choose a different path, Traoré countered. I need details, your team deployment, communications protocols, deadman switches. And in return, safe passage for you and your men to the border, where you'll be escorted to a neutral third country. A full investigation into the Tour Aga massacre, with international observers to ensure transparency. And my personal guarantee that your testimony about who orchestrated this operation will be heard at the highest levels. Daera's internal conflict played across his scarred features. The professional weighing odds and options, the man contemplating betrayal and redemption. Your men respect you, Traoré observed. They follow your commands instantly, without question. That kind of loyalty isn't built on fear alone. They believe in you, Daera. What will they think when they realize they've been deployed as pawns in a resource war? Before Daera could respond, the building shook with a distant explosion. The conference room's lights flickered. That's not a tactical assault, Daera said sharply. That's a diversion, Traoré finished grimly. Your backers are eliminating loose ends. Daera was instantly in motion. Radio raised. All units, defensive positions. We have a third-party intrusion. To Traoré, he said tersely, we need to move, now. In the chaos that followed, the true complexity of the situation unfolded. A third force, mercenaries with no identifying markers, had breached the bank's lower levels, targeting not the hostages but the secure servers that contained the records of Burkina Faso's foreign transactions and mineral rights agreements. Traoré and Daera found themselves in the improbable position of fighting alongside each other to protect both the hostages and the nation's financial sovereignty. As they moved through the building, securing civilians and repelling the mercenary intrusion, the former adversaries formed an uneasy alliance born of necessity and the bank's security center. Musa had already organized the bank's guards into a defensive perimeter around the civilians. When he saw Traoré enter with Daera, his hand instinctively went to his weapon. Stand down, Traoré ordered. Circumstances have changed. The mercenaries are targeting the secure data center on sublevel 2, Daera explained, checking his weapon. Thereafter, the mineral rights documentation. Konate, who had joined the security center staff, looked ashen. That would explain the cyber attacks we've been experiencing. They were mapping our security systems. How many hostiles? Musa asked, professional despite his evident skepticism about Daera. At least 12, Daera replied. Former Eastern European Special Forces, based on their tactics. Traoré made a swift decision. Musa, coordinate with Daera's men to establish a secure evacuation route for the civilians. Daera and I will lead a team to protect the data center. Sir, with respect, I should accompany you. Musa protested. The civilians are our priority, Traoré insisted. Get them out safely. As the evacuation began, Traoré and Daera led a combined team of bank security and Daera's more disciplined men toward the sublevels. The sound of gunfire echoed through the stairwells as they encountered the first of the mercenary team. They're too well-equipped to be independent operators, Daera observed as they took cover behind a security door. This is state-sponsored. Not state, Traoré corrected. Corporate. The new colonialism doesn't need armies. It uses banks, contracts, and private military companies. They fought their way to the data center, a fortified room housing the servers that contained not just banking records, but the digital infrastructure of Burkina Faso's economy. Inside, they found 2 mercenaries attempting to download data while a third placed explosive charges. In the firefight that followed, Traoré demonstrated that his military skills had not diminished during his time in political office. When a mercenary's bullet grazed his arm, he barely flinched, returning fire with practiced precision. Daera, fighting alongside him, displayed the elite training that had made him a formidable special forces operator. Between them, they neutralized the threat, though not before one of the mercenaries triggered a localized EMP device that damaged some of the server equipment. They were erasing rather than stealing, Konate observed when he joined them later, surveying the damaged systems, specifically targeting our new mineral rights framework and the proposed Chinese currency support deal, removing the documentation that would allow us to assert our resource sovereignty, Traoré noted grimly. Without these records, the previous exploitative contracts could be argued as still valid. As the situation stabilized, with the mercenaries either neutralized or in retreat, Traoré addressed the underlying question. The evidence about Turaga, was any of it real? Daera's expression was complex. The satellite imagery was real, but the interpretation was directed. The vehicles were military, but not your units. My handlers provided very specific narratives that aligned with their objectives. By evening, the bank had been secured. The hostage crisis that had begun as an apparent political statement had revealed itself as something far more insidious. An operation designed to maintain economic control over a resource-rich nation seeking independence. In the governor's office. Now serving as a temporary command center, Traoré, Daera, and Konate assessed the day's events and their implications. Your offer of safe passage, Daera began tentatively. Does it still stand? It does, Traoré confirmed. But I would propose an alternative. Your skills, your knowledge of our adversaries' methods, these could be valuable to Burkina Faso's future. You're offering me a position? Daera asked incredulously. After I held a bank hostage and threatened to kill civilians? I'm offering you redemption, Traoré clarified, and the chance to fight for your country's true independence, not as a tool of foreign interests, but as a defender of African sovereignty. Later that night, when the injured had been treated and statements had been taken, Traoré addressed the nation from the steps of the central bank. His arm bandaged, but his resolve unshaken. He spoke not just to his citizens, but to the global powers watching with interest. Today, an attempt was made not just against my life or against innocent civilians, but against our nation's future, he declared. For too long, Africa has been treated as a resource to be exploited rather than a partner to be respected. Those days are ending. He outlined the attempt to sabotage Burkina Faso's economic independence and announced new security measures to protect the nation's financial infrastructure. Without naming specific countries or corporations, he made it clear that Burkina Faso would no longer accept economic arrangements that benefited foreign interests at the expense of its citizens. Leadership, he concluded, is not measured by how one obtains power, but by how one uses it. Today, we have defended not just lives, but our right to determine our own destiny. That defense will continue, with increasing strength and resolve, until Burkina Faso stands as a truly sovereign nation among equals. As the cameras turned away, Traoré shared a moment of understanding with Diarra, who stood at the periphery of the gathered officials. Between them passed the unspoken acknowledgement that power's legitimacy comes not from how it is gained, but how it is employed, for personal advancement or national progress, for perpetuating dependence or building independence. In the weeks that followed, as Burkina Faso continued its complicated journey toward economic sovereignty, Ibrahim Traoré reflected often on the day that had tested both his leadership and his principles. The currency of power, he had learned, was not measured in force or fear, but in the ability to transform enemies into allies and obstacles into opportunities. It was a currency he now spent with greater wisdom, in service to a vision of African dignity that transcended his own ambitions. The central bank stood restored, its systems secured, its role in the nation's future strengthened. And within its walls, the collaboration between former adversaries continued, a testament to the possibility that even in a world of competing interests and violent means, common ground could be found in the shared aspiration for justice and independence.